In today's video, we're going old school. This is a NuTone model IMA406. This was in production from 1975 through the end of 1985, and this was the top of the line 6-wire model of the day. The IMA406 was the first NuTone model to have what they used to call hands-free reply. You have inside and patio talk and listen buttons, along with door speaker talk and listen buttons on every single station in the house. It was a much more convenient system to use. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to open it up and disconnect and remove the master station from where it's installed so you can send it in for repair. As a quick note, this is a door that opens up, and behind the door are your room selector switches. There's 1 through 10. There is no selector switch for the master station. The master station is always radio intercom. You have 2 important adjustments. You have volume to all speakers, which is the music level throughout the house. You have a tone control, which we used to say back in the day gave you treble or less treble. There isn't a lot of bass on these type of systems. There's a little bit of basic instructions on the inside of the door along with the model number at the top. The first thing to do when you're going to remove your set is turn it off. These old systems have a true on-off switch. Now that I've turned it off and the dial lights are out, this system is actually turned off. No part of the system is turned on whatsoever. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to remove the pin at the top of the faceplate. The pin is what holds it closed against the wall, and the pin fits into a bracket that's on the top of the wall housing. So you need a small screwdriver usually. Just put it under the pin and carefully pry it up. If they haven't been removed in a long time, it can be kind of hard to get out. And there's the pin. Here's a better shot of the pin on the top of the master station. Again, you take your flat screwdriver, carefully wedge it underneath the head of the pin, pry it up a little bit, and simply pull it out. Don't lose this. These are no longer available, and while this seems like a really simple little thing, it's important to be the right size to fit through the hole and fit through the hole in the bracket to hold the set against the wall correctly. A lot of times when I go to people's houses, these are lost and they'll have a screw or a nail or something in there, and that doesn't really. So once you remove the pin from the top, all you have to do is let the master station fold down on its hinges. The hinges are located on the bottom of the wall housing, and there are brackets on the bottom of the master station that fit onto the hinge pins. Like most NuTone intercom systems, it has a support strap with a hook on the end. This one's hooked through the hole in the center of the wall housing to give it a lot of support. It's a very strong system. So before we start to disassemble the installation, let's do a quick overview of what we're looking at on the back of the set. The 406 system is a very simple design compared to models that came afterwards. It does have the metal wall housing that will be mounted in your wall. The wall housing is shallow. It's only about 1 3/4 deep. So it doesn't take up as much room, and there's a lot more room for the wiring. So what are we looking at on the back of the set? Here we're looking at the tuner, the AM/FM tuner board. This is the tuning wheel that's connected to the knob with a string. We have to remember this is old school. Down here, this rectangular board is the door or talk and listen module. You have a variety of switches on this side, the system volume and the tone control, the speaker of course, and the rest of this board in this area, this is power supply, amplifier, other intercom control circuit sort of things. And you'll notice that there's this little blue wheel right here. This little blue wheel is the intercom volume adjustment. It's not on the outside of the set like later models would have This was intended to be set by the installer when the system was originally put in. It's not uncommon for this not to have been set at all, and you can simply follow the instructions in the installation manual as for how to set up all the adjustments on the system. Usually this is not set at the right level for most houses. Another interesting adjustment which is on the AM/FM tuner board is this little blue thumb wheel. This thumb wheel is essentially what's called a squelch adjustment. For those of you that might have had CB radios in the 1980s, CB radios usually would have a squelch adjustment also, and its purpose is very similar to this one on this tuner board. When you're scanning between or tuning between radio stations, you'll get a lot of static between stations, and some people find that very annoying. So this thumb wheel can be adjusted to set the squelch adjustment. Basically what you're doing is you're setting a minimum signal level that has to be achieved within the tuner for it to stop and pick up that station. If there's not enough signal, the system stays silent until you get to an actual station. What's interesting is, again, this is supposed to have been adjusted when the system was installed. Generally, they will be wherever they were set when the set was assembled, which is not really correct. What's interesting about this particular one, this unit actually just recently came out of a house to be rebuilt. This is set at maximum squelch, which is where a lot of them are set when I go do service calls. What the problem this creates is it blocks a lot of stations that would come in reasonably well, even though they may not be the strongest stations in your area, but since the squelch is turned all the way up, it completely blocks those stations out. So by adjusting the squelch to a more reasonable level, which this is about 1/3, those slightly weaker stations will now come in and you have more radio stations to listen to. Unlike more modern NuTone master stations, there is no terminal board mounted inside the wall housing. The terminal board is this long rectangular card on the edge of the faceplate. On earlier NuTone intercom systems, the terminal board is usually mounted in the master station itself. So when you go to remove an IMA or an IM406, you have two choices. You can either disconnect all of the wires from all of the screw connections on the terminal board, or you can simply remove the terminal board and leave the wires connected to it. This was a clever design that NuTone came up with starting with this model, and it made it easier to service the models. The serviceman wouldn't have to go out and disconnect all the ladies' wires and mark up where each set of wires were attached. You would just simply remove the terminal board as a complete assembly. So let's start disconnecting things so we can take our IMA406 out of the wall. So from the tuner board, you'll find this heavy gray cable. This is the cable that connects the tuner to the antenna. The antenna is up in the top of the wall housing, as it normally would be, and in the wall housing there's a little terminal strip, and it has two screws and two small round pins. On the end of this gray cable there are two round connectors, and they're plugged into the two round pins. So here you can see the little terminal strip. These white wires are from the antenna. You have two screws that the wires from inside the antenna are attached behind, and here are the two round pin connectors. The gray cable comes up with their round connectors. All you have to do is reach in and pull them off. This was all designed to be very easy to disconnect. The power transformers for an IMA406 is a remotely mounted device. It's not in the wall with the master station. It's not in a drop box inside the wall housing. It's mounted somewhere else in the house. Usually it'll be in the garage or the water heater or furnace closet. If you have basements in your area, it's probably in the basement. Here in California, it also was common for it to be mounted in the ceiling of a hallway coat closet or a bedroom closet ceiling, someplace like that, but not in the wall. So you'll find these two white power wires that come off the back of the master station, and in this one it still has the orange caution label on it telling you not to connect these to 110 volts but to 16 volts from the transformer. And like most installations, this installer used wire nuts. Not always the best thing. Orange wire nuts a little big for this size of wire. So what you have to do is, now you have to remember, these have power in them. Even though we've turned the master station off with the on-off knob, there's still 16 volts in these wires. 16 volts is not enough to hurt you, but there is electricity in there, so I need to tell you that. So here's what you do. To do it safely, so you don't have to worry, take the wire nut off, separate the wires, and this installer did a good job of twisting them together. The wire that comes out of the wall is the wire that comes from the transformer, and that's the wire with the 16 volts of electricity in it. I'm not really a big fan of having any kind of exposed wire with electricity, regardless of how small of an amount it is, floating around inside the wall housing. So take a little bit of tape, fold it over the ends of the wire. That's all you need to insulate them. And then go ahead and disconnect the second one. And put a little piece of tape over that one as well. And then these can just be tucked back into the wall. The white wires that you've disconnected, they are attached to the master station and they stay with it. Make sure that you don't lose the two wire nuts that you have. You'll need them when you go to put the set back in. Now that we've disconnected the power, we're going to disconnect the ground wire. As usual, the ground wire will be a green wire. It'll normally be attached under one of the screws that holds the hinge bracket to the wall housing. All you have to do is loosen it a little bit and take it out from under the screw. This one just has a bare wire that's been bent over to fit around the screw. Some models will have a spade connector on the end of it. That's fine. There were some very early 406 models that had a plug assembly that contained the wires from the transformer and the ground, and it's a small rectangular plug, and to disconnect the last three wires that we've just disconnected, you simply unplug the plug. It's kind of convenient, but I think it was dropped because it was probably added expense and there really wasn't much benefit to it. In this particular example, we're going to leave all of the remote speaker wires on the back of the terminal board, and I'm going to remove the terminal board as a complete assembly. Just to go over what we're looking at here, you have 20 screws that go down the center of the board, and they're in staggered pairs. These are the screws that the red and red-white wires are connected to. So you have number 1 speaker red, red, white, number 2 speaker red, red, white, and so on down the row. On the left-hand side of the terminal board, you have large connections for the orange and orange-white wires and black and black-white wires. On a model like the 406, all of the orange wires are bundled together and put under this screw. All the orange-white wires are bundled together and put under this screw. The same is true for the black and the black-white. There aren't individual screws for every single wire on the system. Some of the other interesting things about how this terminal board is set up is this installer obviously was a real NuTone guy, because this gray and white twisted wire is NuTone IW2 wire, and this is real NuTone door speaker wire. On a 406 system, the door speaker wires are connected under the black and black-white terminals. So if you're going to leave all of this connected, you just leave these under the screws. If you're going to remove the wires from all the screw connections, you would want to put a piece of tape on that and write on the tape door speaker. When you go to reattach those wires, it doesn't make any difference which color goes under which screw. Good workmanship tells you that the gray wire would go under the black screw and the white wire would go under the black-white screw because it's a white wire and you have black with a white stripe, so that logically makes sense. However, this installer apparently didn't think that way, so that's pretty easy to deal with. The other connection we have on this installation down here is there are these two screws, and next to it on the board it says chime. So what's that all about? Well, this system is old enough that things like chime modules didn't exist yet. This is pre-chime module, but you still have the option of having a chime tied into the intercom system. So in your hallway you would have a special NuTone door chime, and you would hear it ring in the hallway just like in everyone's house, but it would also send a signal to the intercom system through this pair of wires. And then if the intercom system was in the on position, you would hear the chime sounds through all of the speakers throughout your house also. So that's what these wires are for. Again, if you were to wanted to disconnect these for some reason, you should mark this wire as the chime wires. And again, it doesn't matter which way you connect this. These systems are not nearly so sophisticated that things like chime wire orientation really matter. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to remove the terminal board from the back of the faceplate. There are 4 screws that hold it in place, and all you have to do is remove the screws. Don't lose the 4 screws. You're going to need them when you put the terminal board back in. Once you've removed the 4 screws, you can simply lift the terminal board out of the faceplate. And here on the other side are our room selector switches that we saw at the beginning of the video behind the door. So now that this is loose from the faceplate, you'll see that there's this bundle of colored wires that come off the top of the terminal board. And if you follow these down, they go into the center of the amplifier board. This bundle of wires will vary somewhat based on when your particular master station was made. Sometimes it's this bundle of colored wires, sometimes it's a flat gray ribbon wire, sometimes it's an off-white colored ribbon wire. It just depends on the production date. So let's look at the connector at the ends of the wires. So here we have the bundle of colored wires, and on the end of them there's this flat card. This is a small piece of circuit board, and all of the wires are soldered onto the circuit board card. They poke through holes and they're soldered on the other side, which I'll show you in a minute. So this is a very clever design. To fully remove the terminal board, you simply grab this card and you'll have to wiggle it back and forth some, and it unplugs from its socket. And if you turn it over, and you can see this unit was manufactured in April 19th, 1977. And on this side you have solder connections, so when you plug it into the socket, it makes the proper connections and ties all of the remote speakers into the system. Now that we've unplugged this, we can take the terminal board and simply leave it in the wall housing here without having to have disconnected all of the wires from it. So let's look at one other thing really quick. Down here, this blue socket is where we just unplugged the card that came from the terminal board. This blue plastic tends to get brittle as it gets older, and when it gets brittle, it's more likely to crack. So if you're unplugging the card from the blue socket, or after you get your set back from repair and you go to plug it back in, care is important. If you crack this socket, the little metal connectors inside of it won't make good contact with the card, and your system won't work the way it was supposed to. So you have to remember that these systems are nearly 40 years old now, and a little bit of care goes a long way. Now that we've disconnected everything, all we have to do is unhook the support strap from the wall housing and slightly tilt up the master and lift it off its hinges. And now your 406 master station is ready to be packed up and sent in for repair. If you found this video helpful, please like it on our YouTube channel. If you think this video would help other people, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. It raises our rankings on YouTube, which simply means that other people it will be easier for them to find our videos. Thank you, and see you again on the next one.